this opportunity. I would like to ask, you mentioned in your speech that India is probably one of the most important centers where we're seeing these concurrent phenomenon of globalization on one hand and regionalism on the other hand. What, in your opinion, I mean, to what extent can we rely on our own democratic governance mechanisms within India, and to what extent can we rely on the global governance paradigms that are emerging? Thank you.
Which reminds me, I failed to answer a similar question when I was answering those 6 on religious intolerance. I'll come back to that.
First, I'd like to congratulate you, Dr. Tharoor, for this very prestigious award. This is like to have the discussion concerning the Indian roles in the global economic reform. Also, I have been looking to India as a champion of developing country when you negotiate the WTO agreement. Also, international financial reform, India also one of the active member of G20. Of course, we have been sharing a lot of ideas, initiatives, how we are to move forward with this some kind of international reform of financial architecture. So this is, I'd like to ask you.
Thank you, Rajan. That too reminds me of a question I didn't answer earlier about whether we shouldn't fight for the trade union of developing countries. I'll come back to that.
My name is Klaus Boll. European diplomats observe that India is perhaps too much focusing on the P5 and neighbor Pakistan, and that MEA is still divided into Europe West and Europe East, and that India is perhaps not fully, for instance, understanding Germany's political role within the EU. Might be this becomes now better after Lisbon. Would you share such opinions, and how would you convince them? And short second one, through which instruments should India better prepare for global governance, through more expanding of its own foreign service, or through other modern instruments in reaching out into other parts of this world?
We'll take a last question and we'll hand it back to the
Very good evening, sir. My name is Anuj Sanila. I'm a student of this campus, graduated about 10 years back. Sir, while we all struggle to, while India struggles so hard to bring itself into inclusion on the global front, my question is very fundamental. Why don't we bring about so much strength in ourselves that the world tries to include us? To protect the body from disease, we do not exterminate the germs, we strengthen immunity. Why don't we ourselves, with JKLF, ULFA, NAXLs, Maoists, when will we become a power to reckon with, so that the globe looks at us and not we trying to look at them?
Great questions, all of them, and so were the first 6. Let me see if I can remember them all this time and not leave any unanswered. On the question of religious extremism and divisions within our own society and globally, of course there is a fundamental domestic responsibility to deal with these issues, and that's something which very clearly our government has taken on as part of its ruling ethos, is indeed to promote what we call secularism. I personally prefer the word pluralism, but the idea of sustaining a plural society where people are not defined or limited in terms of their opportunities by the faith they profess. At the global level, we have been a voice for increased understanding and dialogue amongst various religious traditions. The UN has had a dialogue of civilizations, initially proposed by Iran, followed by an alliance of civilizations led by Turkey and Spain, and these are all very good initiatives to bring together people of different backgrounds, and India remains a strong supporter of these and the way in which these are moving forward. Whether the two reinforce each other, perhaps, is part of your question. And I would argue that clearly they do, because ultimately at the global level you can establish norms, you can articulate ideas, you can put forward if you like, a certain universal understanding, each of this has to be applied and implemented locally, nationally. And so if others don't do in their countries what we are trying to do in ours, then clearly the global level understanding alone will not suffice to prevent these problems getting out of hand. The second question, of course, Ambassador, also ties into an earlier one that was asked as to whether India, instead of seeking to get into the Security Council, permanent membership shouldn't instead be content with leading the developing world. The answer is, of course, we have led the developing world. I mean, we have been a founding member of the Non-Aligned Movement, a founding member of the G77 group of developing countries. As Ambassador rightly pointed out, there's been a lot of work already done in terms of trying to reform international economic practices and financial institutions. We have led the global fight for decolonization as head of the UN Decolonization Committee. We have fought against apartheid in South Africa. From a year before we were independent, we first raised it in 1946. So there is a long history, if you like, of India being a very strong member of the trade union of developing countries, formerly oppressed peoples. But I don't think that being a trade unionist should disqualify you from joining the management, especially if you have reached a point of your own experience and your own ability to contribute, where, to go back to that last question, where the managers themselves feel that you belong amongst them. I think we can make a contribution. I say this with a lot of humility, because I don't think that in advancing the argument that we can contribute in that